Someone sold his teenage son into slavery, then went home, killed a goat, tapped a goat in the blood, and handed it to his own father and watched the old man collapse in grief. That man is in your Bible. He's one of the heroes. Here's what nobody tells you about Genesis. It's not a book about good people doing good things. It's about a family so broken, so violent, so willing to destroy each other, that by all logic, they should have disappeared from history completely. A brother murdered in a field. A flood that erased the entire human race. A tower that split the world apart. A father 3 days from killing his own son on a mountain. Brothers who looked their sibling in the eye, threw him in a pit, and then sat down to a promise. Made in a garden, repeated in a nightmare, whispered in a prison cell. And by the time this video ends, you'll see that promise wasn't just for them, it was always for you. Jews rate it as the beginning of the covenant. Muslims honor Abraham and Joseph as prophets. Christians see it as the opening act of a story that finds its climax in a manger and a cross. 50 chapters, and most people have only heard the highlights: an apple, a flood, a tower, a coat of many colors, as if the book were a collection of children's illustrations instead of the raw, adult, devastating origin story of the human condition. So let's go back, all the way back, to before the first sunrise. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's not poetry for poetry's sake, it's a claim. Before matter, before time as we even verse time and age. After the recarved trees grow in it. At the center, 2 trees with names that matter, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God gives Adam work before he gives Adam a rule. Tend the garden. Name the animals. Purpose before prohibition. That's a detail most people miss. Eden wasn't laziness. It was meaningful labor inside, perfect relationship. 1 boundary. 1. You may eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Not because God is petty, because love without the freedom to choose isn't love. It's programming. Adam is alone. That's how temptation usually starts. Not with a command to rebel, with a question that distorts what was actually said. Eve answers correctly. Adam stands beside her, silent. That silence will cost everything. She looks, she takes, she eats, she gives to her husband, and he eats. And the world breaks. Not with thunder, with eyes opening. Suddenly they know they're exposed. They sew fig leaves together. The first human attempt to fix a spiritual wound with a physical patch. It doesn't work. It never works. They hide when God walks in the garden in the cool of the day. Think about how intimate that phrase is. God used to walk with them. Now they crouch behind trees. God makes garments of skin for them. The first death in the story, an animal slain to cover the humans who tried to cover themselves with leaves. Substitution shows up this early. Adam and Eve are sent out of Eden. Exile is the new normal. But the story doesn't stop. It accelerates. Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel. Both bring offerings to God. Abel's is accepted. Cain doesn't rule over it. Cain answers not. Jealousy takes root like a weed you don't pull early enough. God warns him directly. Cain is crouching at your door. It desires you, but you must rule over it. He invites Abel into a field and kills him. When God asks where Abel is, Cain answers with words that still chill. Am I my brother's keeper? The ground that received Abel's blood now refuses Cain's harvest. He becomes a restless wanderer. And yet, even Cain is marked, protected, not because he deserves mercy, but because God is not finished being God. Build an ark, God tells him, a boat in a world that has never seen rain. Neighbors must have laughed, maybe for years, maybe until the sky changed. Noah doesn't argue. The text says he did everything exactly as God commanded him. That kind of obedience is rare in Genesis, and when it appears, it saves the world. The door closes, and it was God who shut him in. Not Noah sealing his own fate. God closing the ark. Judgment outside. Mercy inside. And the fountains of the deep break open. 40 days. 40 nights. Water over everything you knew. Mountains covered. Every living thing gone. When the waters recede, the whole world had one language and one speech. Humanity migrates east. They make a decision. Come, let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Not so we may honor God. Make a name for ourselves. God comes down to see the tower, which is almost ironic because from heaven the tower wasn't impressive at all. He confuses their language. Babel, confuses, their language. The project stops. The people scatter. That's the origin of nations. Not unity, division. From the wreckage of Babel, the camera zooms in on one man in one city, an elderly pagan whose wife is barren. A man. The journey isn't instant blessing. In Canaan, there is famine. In Egypt, there is fare. In tents, there is waiting. Abraham hears the promise again and again. Your offspring will be like the stars, and every year the sky fills with light he cannot touch. The promise survives his failure. That's important. The story doesn't pretend the hero is flawless. Years pass. Still no son. Ishmael is born from Hagar, more pain, more complexity, more consequences that ripple for centuries. Then God changes their names. Sarai becomes Sarah, Princess, and the laugh that once meant disbelief, 3 days of walking. Isaac carries the wood. He asks the question every reader feels in their chest. The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb? Abraham answers with faith that barely holds together. God himself will provide the lamb. At the last possible moment, an angel stops the knife. A ram caught in a thicket. Isaac lives. Abraham names the place the Lord will provide. And the promise echoes again, through your offspring all nations will be blessed. Isaac grows, marries Rebekah, 20 years of barrenness. Then twins wrestle inside her womb so violently she asks God what is happening. God tells her, 2 nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger. Esau is born first, red, hairy, a hunter. Jacob follows, grabbing his heel. The name means deceiver, and for much of his life he lives up to it. One day Esau comes in from the field starving. Jacob is cooking stew. Esau begs for a bowl. Jacob names his price, the birthright. Esau sells the inheritance of a nation for bread and lentil stew. Thus, Esau despised his birthright. When you treat sacred things as cheap, you eventually lose sacred things. Jacob runs with nothing but a stolen blessing and a guilty conscience. Sleeps in the open with a stone for a pillow. Dreams of a ladder between earth and heaven, angels ascending and descending, and God standing above it repeating the promise made to Abraham. I am with you. I will watch over you wherever you go. Jacob wakes afraid. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He names it Bethel, house of God. Years of labor. 2 wives, 11 sons, wealth, trickery. And finally, a wrestling match at the Jabbok River. Jacob alone in the dark, fighting a man until dawn who turns out to be more than a man, his hip dislocated. Here comes the dreamer, the 7-year cast considered to every brother watching. You're loved more than the rest. Here comes the dreamer, they say. They strip the robe, throw him in a cistern, sit down to eat while he cries out below them, then sell him to traders heading to Egypt. 20 shekels of silver, the price of a slave. They dip the robe in goat's blood and bring it to Jacob. We found this. Is it your son's robe? Jacob collapses into grief so deep he refuses comfort for years. Meanwhile, Joseph is dragged to Egypt, sold to Potiphar, falsely accused, thrown in prison, interprets dreams for fellow prisoners, asks to be remembered, forgotten for 2 full years. Then Pharaoh dreams, 7 fat cows devout. The boy sold by his broken wise now holds the keys to survival for an entire civilization. Jacob sends 10 sons to Egypt to buy grain. They stand before a ruler they don't recognize. Joseph recognizes them immediately. He tests them, accuses them of being spies, watches their fear, listens as they confess guilt about a brother they sold years ago, still carrying that weight. Something has changed in this family. Pain has done a slow work. Judah, the same Judah who said sell him, now begs for his youngest brother's life, offers himself as a slave instead. Joseph can no longer hold it in. He clears the room and weeps so loudly the Egyptians in the next hall can hear it. He weeps on Benjamin's neck. He embraces the brothers who sold him. He sends wagons for Jacob. When the old man hears Joseph is alive, his spirit revives after 22 years of mourning. The family reunites. Jacob lives 17 more years. On his deathbed, he blesses each son, prophecies woven into poetry. Then he dies and is carried back to Canaan to be buried in the field Abraham bought centuries before. Joseph's brothers panic when Jacob is gone. Now comes the reckoning. Joseph weeps again. Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. He speaks kindly to them, provides, not with a triumph parade with a coffin in a foreign country and a promise still waiting to be fulfilled. If you've been tracking the thread from Eden, you notice something. Every major story in Genesis asks the same question. Will humanity trust God or seize control? Adam and Eve seized the fruit. Cain seized his brother's life. Babel seized a name. Abraham's descendants seized blessings, birthrights, coats, silver, power. And still God kept showing up. In dreams, in ladders, in wrestling matches, in prison cells, in famine years when the only thing standing between death and life was a brother they once sold for 20 pieces of silver. Genesis creation shows what we were made for. The fall shows what went wrong. Cain and Abel shows that judgment is real. Noah shows that judgment is real, and so is mercy. Babel shows what happens when humanity unites around the wrong thing. Abraham shows that God builds his plan through flawed people in impossible circumstances. And Joseph shows that the worst thing that ever happened to you is not the last word. If God is telling the story, and here's where Genesis points forward, not as an appendix, but as a loaded gun aimed at the rest of Scripture. That promise in Eden, the offspring of the woman who will crush the serpent's head. The ram on Moriah. The New Testament doesn't hide the connection. Matthew opens with a genealogy that starts in Genesis. John calls Jesus the Word who was with God in the beginning, the same Word that spoke light into darkness in chapter 1. Paul calls him the offspring of Abraham through whom the blessing comes. Jesus himself pointed back. Before Abraham was, I am. Read Genesis with those eyes and the book catches fire. The garden lost becomes a garden tomb found. The covering of skins becomes a body broken for many. The ram on Moriah whispers of another father who did not spare his son. The ladder at Bethel becomes a man who is the bridge between heaven and earth. Joseph, rejected and raised to save the world, becomes the eye. The first book ends in Egypt, a nation of slaves not yet born, bones in a coffin waiting for a homeland, a family that should have destroyed itself but didn't, because something larger was moving underneath the chaos all along. The story doesn't end in Genesis. It starts there. And the question Genesis leaves on the table, the same one God asked in a garden, the same one Joseph answered by walking, the same one Joseph answered by forgiving brothers who didn't deserve it, is the question you still have to answer. When the serpent whispered, did God really say? Who did you believe? When exile felt permanent and the promise felt dead, did you keep walking?